Hello everyone, my name is John from Vulgar Kitten Studios, and this is a continuation of our third-person controller system in Unity 3D using mecanim. And in this one, we're going to go ahead and set up our inputs and start coding. So the first thing that we want to do is open our project and go into Project Settings, Input. And there's only a couple of edits that we'll need to make because I'm actually developing this for the Xbox controller. However, it should work perfectly fine, or for the most part it should work perfectly fine with a keyboard and mouse. You'll just have to edit the new inputs that we're going to make for the right X and right Y for the right analog stick on an Xbox controller. And you could just do that too. You can use the mouse X and the mouse Y to substitute for what we'll be doing with the right X and right Y. So the first thing that we'll need to do is we'll need to go into jump, and we'll add an alternate positive button, and we'll say joystick button 0, so that we want to jump when we press the A button. And I'll replace the bottom fire one with right X, and we don't need a button for this one. So we'll change that to joystick axis, and we'll change this to the 4th axis. And we'll need one for right Y, so we'll change this to right Y. Again, we don't need a button, and we'll change this to joystick axis and this to 5th axis. Okay, and we also want to modify the gravity and dead zone and sensitivity for these, so we'll change the gravity to 1, the dead to 0.2, and the sensitivity to 1. And you want to do that for right X as well. So just 1, 0.2, 1. Okay. And that's all we need to do for our input. So we'll just go ahead and start making out these scripts. The first one, and the only one that we'll be working on in this video, is the helper class, or the helper namespace. So under system, under scripts, I'm just going to make a new C# script and call it helper. And it's always a good idea to make a helper class, and you'll see what its purpose is once we start coding it, but I just want to go ahead and make the other 3 scripts that we'll be writing as well. So under player, we'll do new C# script and call this player character, and we'll make another one, call it player motor, and one more, we'll call this player camera. And that's another thing too, I actually do want to change this tag for the main camera. I don't want to use main camera just because I'll be using main camera most of the time. If I'm making a cutscene sequence, I'll use main camera for that, and player camera for the player's camera instead. So I'll just make a new tag and call this player camera. Just make sure we tag that player camera. And might as well change the name of it too, so just player camera. Okay. And let's go ahead and open up the helper class. So double click on this to open it up in MonoDevelop. And sometimes it does take a little bit of time, so I apologize about that. I'll pause the video until it's loaded and I'll be right back. Okay, so we have it loaded up here, and let's just go ahead and start coding. So we're not going to be using a class. So I'm going to erase the inheritance, and I'll change this to a namespace. So just all one word, namespace, and just call that helper. And I'm going to use different types of regions as well. So the first one, I'm just going to call that reference cache. So reference cache. And in here I'll be making a bunch of classes with static strings, so it just makes it easier to use IntelliSense, and we'll always know that we have the correct spellings, and it just makes things a little bit easier to work with it in this way rather than typing out strings every time that we need one. And the second one, I forget what I called that. Second region we'll be using is the Fsm Enumerations. So FSM stands for finite state machine, if you're unfamiliar with the term, and the way that we'll be constructing those is using enumerations, and so that's why I've done this in this way. And so we'll need one more. I'm going to call this object structures, and this is where we will be making structs to be able to access and create different game objects on the fly rather than manually position them in the editor. So I'll just go ahead and get rid of the rest of this here. Let's start getting this code. Now I've already written this out, so I'm just going to copy it in as we go and explain it. So first class that we'll need is the input class, so I'll say public class player input, and the first two that we'll use is the horizontal and vertical axis. So we want to make static strings with the proper spellings of those. Okay, and we'll also need values for the right X and right Y, so I'll put those in there as well. And I also like to set up our game tags as well, so I'll make another public class and call this game tag, and this is where we can make static strings in the same way that access the tags that we have in game. So I'm just going to put in all of the system tags that come default with Unity, and our tag, the only tag that we have right now, which is player camera. Okay, and I'll make another class and call this resource, and this is so we can store file paths to our resources folder, so we can use the resources.load method. And the only thing that we have in our resources right now is the animator, or the animator controller, so we'll make a static string called the animator controller and set up the file path system/player animator to access that component. Alright, and we also need our animator conditions, so the parameters that we put in our animator controller, and I'm just going to call this animator conditions and set up static strings to each one of those, our speed, direction, grounded, and air velocity as well. Okay, and for our Fsm enumerations, we'll have two of them, one for our camera state and one for our speed state, for the speed at which our player can move. So I'll just copy these in here right now. We have two states in our camera, normal and target. We'll only be covering the normal state in this tutorial. Or maybe I'll do the target, I haven't really decided yet, but this is really just to show you how you can use FSMs to make your code more modular and more expandable. And we'll need three states in our speed state, and that's for walk, run, and sprint. We'll really only be working with run, but again, this is just kind of a technical exercise that I wanted to include to show you how it can be used. Okay, and for our object structures, we'll need to make two structs. The first one is for camera object, or for our camera target object, and what this is just a collection of values that we can use to create objects or manipulate data externally. So this isn't actually logic itself, but it does include methods and it does include its own variables, but it's a structure, and you'll see how it works once we actually type this out. So it needs a position, it needs a transform. The position is vector 3, and you'll need to make some accessors for that, or for both of those, and then you'll need a method that accepts a name, a position, its own transform, and then the parent. So we're going to be able to assign the parent of the objects by calling the initialization method from this struct. And our other struct, it looks exactly the same way, except we're going to call it camera mount point, so that way we can create two separate objects using the same data structure type. And that does it for our helper class, and I'll see you in the next tutorial when we start coding our player camera. Alright?